Ready the drones! Captain Eamon Greyridge's voice cut through the thick, static-filled silence of the Tiberis' bridge. The familiar clank of metal feet echoed as the crew moved into their positions, their movements sharp and synchronized despite the disheveled nature of their surroundings. Outside the bridge's viewport, the darkness of space stretched infinitely, a cold canvas splattered with distant stars that burned with unforgiving brightness. The station at the edge of the neutral zone flickered weakly in the distance. Greyridge could barely see it now. The ship's sensors were engaged on higher priority targets, alien warships, waiting for the moment when everything would change. "We can't afford a delay," Greyridge muttered to himself, scanning his heads-up display. Sweat beaded along his brow, a rare sign of tension. He wiped it off, then returned to his task, his hands moving with mechanical precision. The crew didn't need to hear the strain in his voice to know the stakes. They all knew the galaxy wasn't kind to those it underestimated. "All drones in position, Captain." Lieutenant Derek Uxar's voice was calm, almost casual, but with a sharp undertone that betrayed his awareness of the enormity of the moment. Greyridge glanced at the plasma screens, where the shapes of distant alien ships loomed, practically bristling with weaponry. These were allies, enemies to humanity, locked in an alliance to wipe out the human colonies. No one had thought the Tiberis was worth noticing. "Well, they're about to learn just how wrong they were," Greyridge muttered, more to himself than anyone else. His fingers brushed the edge of the control panel, a small piece of comfort in a chaotic universe. The illusion of control, even for a fleeting second, was something he needed. With a sharp motion, his finger hit the button to deploy the drones. The soft whine of servos was the only warning before the hangar doors opened, spilling out hundreds of stealth drones into the blackness. They sliced through the void like razor-thin blades, each moving with a pre-programmed goal to cripple the enemy. "All systems on standby," Uxar confirmed, his fingers flying across his console. The ship's laser plasma displays blinked once, twice, showing the status of the engagement. The drones were nearing the alien fleet. The bridge was unnervingly quiet for such a critical operation. The crew was used to this, years of working in tandem, anticipating Greyridge's next move without question. The ship was as much a part of them as their own skin. "Reed, prep communications," Greyridge ordered, his gaze flickering toward the officer at the comm station. "Lisa Reed." The communications officer gave a quick nod, her hands deftly manipulating the heads-up display to hack into the alien fleet systems. Every click and swipe was precise, betraying the gravity of their situation. "Sending a signal, sir," she replied, not bothering to look up from her screen. "Disrupting their frequencies now. They won't be able to respond in time." "Good. Keep it steady. They've never seen anything like this before." The alien fleet was closing in now, massive gleaming ships painted in unnatural shades of red and silver. The shimmering reflection of the distant stars played across their armored hulls, creating a deceptive image of invulnerability. It was a false image. The Tiberis, despite its beaten-up hull and exposed structural elements, carried the most advanced weapons humanity had ever built. The very technology that alien species dismissed as primitive, those very systems, were about to deal the aliens a blow they would never forget. Greyridge's fingers drummed lightly on the console as he reviewed the data flashing before him. No room for error now. As the alien ships drew closer, an eerie stillness crept over the bridge. The moment they had waited for was here. Every person on board could feel it in their bones. The calm before the storm. The air tingled with anticipation, thick with tension. "We're within range," Uxar said flatly, not missing a beat. "Ready when you are, Captain." Greyridge nodded, his voice a low rumble. "Execute." The command was sharp, precise. Immediately, the drones ignited, rocketing toward the alien fleet with such blinding speed that their movements were almost imperceptible to the human eye. Greyridge watched as the drones struck, their tiny forms ripping through the alien ships like bees in a swarm, but with the impact of thunderstorms. The aliens' energy shields, designed to block massive weaponry, flickered under the assault. The ship shook slightly as the explosion rattled the hull. Small tremors, but enough to let the crew know that the chaos had begun. The alien commanders, who had looked down on the Tiberis and its crew, struggled to comprehend what was happening. The Tiberis had appeared weak, clumsy, damaged beneath their notice. But now the truth was undeniable. The alien fleet screeched in surprise, the sound of shock ringing across the comms as their shields buckled under the unexpected assault. "Report!" Greyridge barked, his gaze fixed firmly on the chaos unfolding on the displays. "Shields are failing on the lead ship," Uxar said calmly, his hands moving as fast as his mind. "Drones are penetrating their hulls. It's working, Captain." Greyridge allowed himself a fleeting smirk. Just as planned, but their work wasn't done. The Tiberis wasn't merely a ship. It was the key to a larger strategy, a strategy that would now begin to unfold with deadly precision. "Reed," Greyridge said, his voice low. "Make sure the fleet's movements are recorded, every detail, every shift in their formations. I want this information transmitted back to Earth Command the moment we're done." "Yes, Captain," Reed replied, her fingers flying over her console. The battle raged on, the Tiberis now revealing its true form beneath the cracked facade. Alien ships buckled under the surprise assault, their hull integrity failing faster than they could adjust to the unexpected threat. The Tiberis had proven its worth, but this was only the beginning. The galaxy had long seen humanity as nothing more than an afterthought, a species to ignore. The same alien species who had scoffed at their primitive technology, mocked their ships and their ways, were now fighting to survive against the very force they had dismissed. Greyridge stood at the center of it all, calm amidst the storm, his eyes never leaving the screen. His crew, equally focused, moved like a well-oiled machine, each person playing their part to perfection. They were the underdogs, but their time had come, and they would not be underestimated any longer. The last echoes of the explosion reverberated across the cold silence of space, the shattering of alien shields still fresh in the air of the Tiberis's bridge. Greyridge didn't move, his eyes fixed on the screen. Alien ships were crumbling, faltering under the weight of their own arrogance. But the battle wasn't over, not yet. The swarm had merely begun its mission. His crew had done their part, but it was now a matter of sustaining the momentum. The distant light from the battle illuminated the bridge, casting long shadows that stretched across the worn equipment. The walls of the bridge groaned under the pressure, and the flickering laser plasma displays offered moments of clarity, then vanished in a static blur. Each readout, each sensor, told the same story. The Tiberis had caught them off guard, but the alien forces were regrouping, their retaliation already in motion. "Captain," Uxar's voice cut through the tension, low but urgent. "Incoming reinforcements. Their response fleet's almost here." His fingers moved, quick but controlled, over the heads-up display, tracking the new arrivals as they appeared on the screen. "They're faster than I expected." Greyridge nodded, a barely perceptible tightening of his jaw. "We knew they wouldn't be pleased. And they'll be better prepared this time." "Prepare for a shift in their tactics," Uxar continued, his eyes narrowing. "They're not taking us lightly anymore. I can see them adjusting their formation, tightening their ranks." Greyridge exhaled sharply, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. There was something in the alien's reaction that unsettled him. No hesitation. They were already adapting, evolving their response to the human's deception. This fight wasn't over, not by a long shot. His eyes flickered to the laser plasma display as he toggled through the fleet's movements. The alien ships, now coalescing into a more compact formation, looked as if they were planning to strike with far more savage precision than before. "Reed!" Greyridge barked. "I need the comm scrambler working now. I don't want them hearing anything they shouldn't." "Already on it, Captain." Reed's voice was sharp, focused, as she twisted her wrist, activating the comm scrambler. The hum of the equipment blended into the background, but there was no relief in the atmosphere. Tension coiled tight in the small confines of the bridge, anxiety thickening the air. No one spoke, but every movement was deliberate, every glance toward the readouts urgent. "They'll think they've figured us out," Greyridge muttered, pacing slowly, the floor beneath his boots creaking as if the ship itself was weary. "They're wrong." "Of course they are," Uxar replied. not even glancing up from his display. The flicker of green lights under his fingertips indicated a course correction, a small but vital adjustment. They think we're clumsy, that our ship is a joke. We'll give them a reason to laugh when they see how wrong they are. Grayridge turned toward his first officer, his voice low and calculated. Don't mistake the quiet. They've underestimated us for too long, and I won't let that continue. We won't stay hidden forever. His voice dropped, carrying a hint of something sharper beneath the calm exterior. But right now, let them think we're still stumbling. At the far corner of the bridge, Raoul Vissar, the ship's engineer, stood hunched over a set of laser plasma diagnostics, his fingers dancing over the screen. His brow was furrowed, his face a mask of concentration. The ship's systems had been jimmied together to look like patchwork, a facade of ragged makeshift repairs that hid the heart of the Tiberis. But Visor knew, Grayridge knew, the ship's capabilities weren't what they seemed, not by a long shot. Captain, Vissar's voice cracked the stillness. We're in position, ready for Phase 2 of the plan. The drones are locked and loaded. Grayridge turned his head sharply. Make sure they don't see us coming. I'll make sure they don't even know what hit them, Vissar responded, his voice low and steady. But there was a hint of something darker in it, a promise of something dangerous simmering beneath the surface. The hum of the ship's engines didn't rise. It stayed steady, masked under layers of misdirection. The static-filled atmosphere on the bridge thickened again as the alien ships drew closer, their hulls glimmering like glowing embers against the black canvas of space. The enemy had no idea that the humans were already in motion, their movements deliberate, calculated. Suddenly, a violent blip flashed on the plasma display. One of the alien ships had detected something, a faint disturbance, but it wasn't enough to pinpoint the Tiberis. Still, it was enough to trigger a response. Captain, Uxar's voice was tight now. They're adjusting their energy patterns. They might be trying to get a lock on us. Grayridge barely reacted. His eyes flickered to the readout. Let them. We're not the ones they should be focused on. Get those drones moving. His voice had an edge to it, low and clipped, calculated. The Tiberis shifted in the blackness, its worn hull catching glints of light as it began its slow, deliberate movement. The drones inside it, quietly humming, began to deploy. Tens of thousands of them, all designed to strike swiftly, with deadly accuracy. Grayridge's gaze was locked on the display, watching the alien fleet continue its formation shift, their arrogance still thick in the air. But something was off. Something had shifted in their tactics. Familiarity was no longer their weapon. The aliens, for the first time, seemed unsure. Their attacks were becoming more erratic, almost desperate. Lieutenant, Grayridge said softly, but with an intensity that rang through the quiet of the bridge. They'll soon realize we're not the target, but they'll keep coming, and when they do, we'll be ready. Suddenly a loud crackle came from the comms. The alien ships were attempting a hasty transmission, but it wasn't aimed at the Tiberis. It was directed at their fleet, orders to accelerate their assault. They were panicking. They had expected the humans to crumble, to collapse in fear, but humanity had turned the tables. Let them panic. We have them right where we want them, Grayridge said, his lips curling into a smile that didn't reach his eyes. His hand moved slowly, carefully tapping the button to send a coded message back to Earth Command, readying the next phase of their plan. But there was one thought, one small part of his mind that tugged at him, an unsettling tinge of suspicion. Could they truly have been underestimated to this extent? Or had they only begun to scratch the surface of something far bigger than they had anticipated? Are we still on target, Uxar? Grayridge's voice was calm, but his gaze never wavered. The battle was just beginning, and now the galaxy was about to learn what it meant to underestimate humanity's will. Yes, Captain. Just waiting for your signal. The Tiberis sat in the shadows, its rusted hull a deceptive cloak hiding the true nature of what it had become. Grayridge's heart raced with the thrill of the moment, but his mind kept its focus sharp. No, the real fight hadn't even started yet. And as the Tiberis crept forward into the darkness, the alien fleet continued to follow, unaware that they were marching straight into a trap. The ship trembled as the enemy fleet advanced, their engines roaring with a force that shook the Tiberis' worn hull. But inside, the bridge was eerily quiet, each crew member focused, their movements smooth and deliberate. Grayridge's eyes were fixed on the screens, tracking the alien ships as they maneuvered into position, their formation tightening like an iron fist preparing to crush its prey. The air on the bridge was thick, a palpable buzzing tension that hummed under every breath. "We've crossed the threshold," Lieutenant Uxar muttered, eyes locked onto the laser plasma display, the image of the alien fleet solidifying on the screen. They were closing in faster than expected, now almost directly in line with their path. He sounded calm, but the subtle edge in his voice was unmistakable. They were getting too close. Grayridge remained still, his jaw clenched as he studied the enemy ships, each one gleaming with arrogance, as if they owned the cosmos. The Tiberis, by contrast, looked like a scrap heap, a wrecked relic adrift in the dark. They could not be further from the truth. "We're not ready to move yet," Grayridge said quietly. "Not until they've stepped into our web." The crew worked in silence, every second ticking by with a sense of urgency. Reed's fingers hovered over her control panel, her eyes darting between the heads-up displays and the feedback from her comm system. "They're picking up the signal, Captain," she said, her voice steady despite the looming tension. "But it's a weak signal, almost too weak to notice." "Perfect," Grayridge responded. "Let them believe we're barely holding it together." The seconds stretched out as the alien fleet moved steadily closer, now within striking distance. The glowing hulls of their ships seemed to shimmer against the backdrop of the infinite black void, like predators sizing up their prey. But there was something in their movements that set Grayridge's nerves on edge. They weren't acting like a coordinated force anymore. Something was off. Were they stalling? Had they begun to doubt themselves? "It's not what we thought," Uxar's voice snapped him out of his thoughts. "They're waiting. They're waiting for something." Grayridge stiffened. "For what?" "I don't know, Captain, but they've gone dark. No more comms chatter. No signals. They've stopped advancing." "Then they're not taking us lightly anymore," Grayridge muttered. He stood, his boots scuffing lightly against the floor. The tension in the room was so thick it was almost tangible, the kind of weight that hung heavily on their shoulders. "Reed, increase the jamming. Let's make sure they stay in the dark." The young communications officer nodded and set to work, her fingers flashing across the control panel with efficient precision. The low, steady pulse of the jamming system filled the room, growing louder with each passing moment, masking their signals, making them appear like a fading ghost in the vastness of space. "We've almost pulled them in," Uxar added, his fingers now dancing over his own console, a small smile curling at the corners of his lips. "Give it another few moments, Captain." "Hold tight," Grayridge ordered, the command barely audible over the hum of the bridge's equipment. "Stay ready." The ship continued to move, sluggishly, almost lazily, as if it were malfunctioning. The Tiberis' false imperfections were deliberately highlighted, flickering displays on the walls, sparks occasionally jumping from a loose panel. The worn grating beneath their feet creaked like it might collapse at any moment, but Grayridge could see the enemy fleet's warships steadily closing the gap, their ominous bulk drawing nearer, and then the slightest tremor. A quiet ripple passed through the ship. The alien fleet had launched their first salvo, a wide barrage of energy blasts, aimed to incapacitate, to break them apart. Grayridge's eyes narrowed, watching the trajectory of the incoming fire, assessing, waiting. The Tiberis lurched, but it didn't falter. The deflector shields held firm, cloaked under layers of false vulnerability. "We've got them," Uxar murmured under his breath. "They took the bait." "Now," Grayridge's voice was a low growl, "now we show them why they shouldn't have bothered." With a quick gesture, Grayridge signaled to Visser. A cold snap of air swept through the bridge as the ship's main power system surged, humming to life with a low, menacing energy. On the plasma screens, the aliens' attacks seemed to disintegrate as the drone swarm, hidden under layers of misdirection, unfurled from the Tiberis' concealed launchers, slicing through the darkness like a flock of birds. The drone surged forward, cutting through the void with deadly precision, moving in formations designed to overwhelm, to confuse. They surrounded the alien fleet, a seemingly endless sea of mechanized destruction, small but powerful, each with a singular goal: to hit where the enemy was weakest. The first few hits were precise, surgical. Alien ships erupted into bursts of light as their shields buckled, the drones slicing clean through their defenses. Greyridge allowed himself a rare smile, watching as the first wave of alien ships floundered. They hadn't even seen it coming. But even as their power began to wane, the alien forces fought back. Their remaining ships began to tighten into a defensive formation, their engines flaring as they attempted to disperse the swarm. "They're adapting," Uxar said, his voice low, eyes tracing the fleet's movements with methodical calculation. "They're trying to break the formation." "Let them try," Greyridge responded, his gaze hardening. "It's a game we'll win." Reed's voice cut through the tension once more. "Captain, we've got a new target incoming. It's big, a cruiser, unlike anything we've seen before. No records in our databases." Greyridge frowned, staring at the heads-up display as the image of the massive alien ship filled the screen. Its hull was an unbroken expanse of dark, reflective metal, its design unlike anything the humans had encountered. It was stark, imposing, and for the first time, Greyridge felt something unfamiliar rise within him, a prickle of doubt. "We can't let them get close," he said, his voice a little sharper now. "Get the rest of the drones out there. I want that cruiser neutralized." A tense silence followed, then a surge of activity. The crew scrambled, their movements swift and purposeful, as they prepared for a new wave of attack. The massive cruiser was drawing closer, its energy pulses flaring violently into the void. The Tiberis lurched, its hull trembling under the strain, but the drone swarm held steady, a testament to its creator's ingenuity. Greyridge could almost hear the aliens' arrogance, still echoing through the space, taunting them. They thought the Tiberis was a fluke, a lucky shot, but they were wrong. "Captain!" Uxar's voice rang out, interrupting the stillness of the bridge. "We're about to hit them with everything we've got." Greyridge nodded, his eyes never leaving the screen. The pieces were in place now, and this time there was no turning back. In the growing chaos of the battle, the crew's role had never been clearer. They were not the underdogs anymore. They were the predators. And now, as the alien forces continued to tighten their grip around New Eden, humanity had just begun to strike back. The battle had reached a fever pitch. The alien fleet, now fully aware of the danger the Tiberis posed, had regrouped into a defensive formation, their movements erratic but desperate. The massive cruiser, the one Greyridge had marked as their primary target, loomed ever closer. It was a creature of darkness, a hulking mass of power and aggression, its stealth shields flickering like an angry storm, daring anyone to challenge its might. Greyridge's hands gripped the edge of his console, every nerve on edge as his mind sifted through their plan, assessing, anticipating. "They're too close," he murmured under his breath, eyes narrowing. He didn't need to look at Uxar to know that the alien fleet was nearing the point of no return. But this wasn't the moment to panic. This was their opportunity, the opening they had been waiting for. The enemy thought they were cornered, but they were mistaken. "Reed!" Greyridge barked, his voice carrying the weight of urgency. "Boost the signal. We need to look like we're losing power." Reed's fingers danced across the heads-up display, tweaking the systems. "You got it, Captain. They'll be convinced we're barely holding on." On the screens, the Tiberis seemed to stutter, as if its systems were failing. The flickering of its exterior, the telltale sparks and pulses of erratic energy, it was all part of the ruse. The alien fleet, growing ever more confident, moved forward, closing the distance. They were underestimating the Tiberis once more, but the real strike was coming. "We can't give them too much time." Uxar's voice was steady, but there was a flicker of impatience in it. He had seen this before, and Greyridge's plan was sound, but it was tight. "If they get any closer, we'll lose the advantage." Greyridge's eyes locked on the display and his mind raced through the steps. "I know. We'll act when they cross the line. They'll think we're dead in the water, but we've got the right tools for this fight." "Captain!" Visser's voice called from across the room. the tone calm but heavy with significance. He didn't need to look up from his station to know the tension was mounting. I've got the next phase queued up. The secondary swarm is ready for deployment. It's bigger, and it'll hit faster. Greyridge turned, his voice low but full of resolve. Now, deploy it. Make sure they don't have a moment to regroup. A ripple of activity surged through the crew. Vicer's fingers hovered over the controls, then pressed down with deliberate force. A low whine of systems activating filled the room as the secondary swarm of drones ejected from the ship's concealed bays. Each drone seemed to explode into the blackness of space, a swarm of gleaming weapons, moving with purpose, their trajectories aimed at the soft underbelly of the enemy fleet. The first wave of alien ships was still struggling to recover from the initial blow, their shields crippled, their weapons firing blindly into the void. The secondary swarm weaved through the chaos, moving with unmatched precision, tiny, deadly, and absolutely relentless. Each drone embedded itself into the hulls of the alien ships, siphoning energy from their systems, rendering their weapons useless. The alien fleet, massive and imposing only moments ago, was now floundering, its ships falling into disarray as their systems began to collapse. Greyridge's lips barely twitched, but a fire burned in his chest, seeing the chaos unfold. They had done it. The aliens had walked into a trap so carefully set that they had no chance of escaping. But just as the first wave of destruction seemed to slow, the alien cruiser, the one Greyridge had been watching, roared forward with deadly intent. It powered through the debris, its blinding cannons firing indiscriminately at the drones. The Tiberis was now the focus of its rage. "We've got a problem," Uxar said through gritted teeth. "They're coming at us." Greyridge's gaze snapped to the screen. The cruiser was charging straight toward them, its energy beams cutting through the debris, laser blasts scorching the void. The ship's heavy assault weapons were aimed directly at the Tiberis. Greyridge's crew had no time to breathe. This was their moment to end it all. "Brace for impact," Greyridge said, his voice as calm as ever, but the weight of the moment pressing down on him like a raging storm. "Reed, power down the shields. Make them think we're finished." "But Captain," Reed started, her brow furrowed in confusion. "Do it," Greyridge snapped, his voice firm. He knew exactly what needed to happen. The aliens would believe they were victorious if the Tiberis appeared completely defenseless. But that was the moment when the real attack would come. For a moment the ship seemed to shudder, as if it were taking a last breath before its end. The alien cruiser fired again, its beams lancing through space, each one aimed for the heart of the Tiberis. Then, in the blink of an eye, the real weapon revealed itself. "Now!" Greyridge shouted, and Visser slammed his fist onto the control panel. A sharp screech of energy sliced through the ship as the Tiberis weapon systems flared to life. The drones, which had appeared to be outmatched, now began to multiply and surge forward with deadly intensity. They weren't just mechanical threats anymore. They were strategic extensions of the ship's will, and they were far more than the aliens had imagined. The Tiberis opened fire. The ship's advanced energy cannons, hidden beneath layers of illusion, unleashed their fury. The alien cruiser tried to pivot, but it was too late. Energy waves tore through the ship, disintegrating its hull as the drones intensified their assault. Within moments, the cruiser's entire command structure collapsed, and the ship itself fell silent, a massive hulk of twisted metal. "We've got them!" Uxar yelled, his voice breaking the heavy silence. The rest of the fleet was already falling into chaos. The drones, now powered by their own assault, swarmed the remaining ships like locusts, turning the tide of battle in seconds. But even as the last of the alien ships burned in the void, Greyridge knew better than to relax. The real work had only just begun. He turned to his crew, his voice quieter but no less intense. "Send everything we've gathered back to Earth," he ordered, his hands resting on the console, a calm center amidst the storm. "The galaxy won't believe this. We've just thrown a punch they never saw coming." The crew responded quickly, the comm systems buzzing as they scrambled to transmit the data, encoding it into a dense packet of false readings to cover their tracks. The battle was won, but the war had just taken a dramatic turn. The aliens were done for now, But their pride and their mistakes would linger long enough for Grey Ridge and his crew to maneuver the final phase of their strategy. As the Tiberis drifted away from the wreckage, its hull now covered in scorched patches, the crew sat in relative silence, knowing the full extent of the destruction they had caused. Grey Ridge remained at his post, his mind already calculating the next move, his eyes never leaving the screen. They had won this battle, but the war was far from over. He could feel it. A new chapter was about to begin. The galaxy would never look at humanity the same way again. The smoke of destruction still drifted in the cold black of space, a veil of shattered alien ships that now floated silently, broken and still. The Tiberis, once thought to be a floating tomb of humanity's obsolete technology, now sat amidst the wreckage, a dark sentinel. The battle was over, but Grey Ridge knew better than to linger in the afterglow. There was no time for triumph, no space for relief. The enemy had been crushed, but humanity's future was just beginning to take shape. "Captain," Uxar's voice came in low, almost a whisper, as if he too understood the weight of the silence around them. "The aliens are retreating. The fleet is falling apart." His eyes flickered over the displays, scanning for any remaining threats. His voice was calm, but underneath the surface there was something deeper, something that resonated with the sharp edge of reality. The reality that this wasn't just another battle, that they had just changed the course of history. Grey Ridge didn't answer immediately. His fingers rested lightly on the console in front of him, his gaze fixed on the ghostly figures of the alien warships slowly breaking apart. The drone swarm that had torn through them was now returning to the Tiberis, swarming back into their hangars like bees returning to their hive after a successful hunt. The ship, beaten and battered, told its own story, an unspoken testament to the deceptive power hidden beneath the surface. "Send the data to Earth," Grey Ridge finally said, his voice steady but thick with purpose. "Make sure they understand what just happened here. We need to prepare for what's coming next." Reed's fingers tapped across the display, encoding the information and sending it back in scrambled bursts, ensuring that their victory wouldn't be a simple accident. This was a carefully orchestrated message, and it was time for the galaxy to understand just how deeply they had been fooled. "Earth Command received the data," Reed reported, her voice unshaken but carrying a note of tension. "They're already scrambling their response." Grey Ridge nodded. His mind was already racing. "Good. Keep the signal encrypted. This isn't over yet." He turned to Uxar, whose eyes were still scanning the screen, tracking the enemy's retreat. The fleet was a fleeing shadow now, a symbol of overconfidence turned to dust. But Grey Ridge knew they'd be back. The aliens would never forget this. Their pride, their blind faith in their superiority, had been shattered, and that would make them dangerous. The silence on the bridge was heavier than it had ever been. The crew, a mix of seasoned soldiers and engineers, now shared a single thought. It was done. The impossible had been achieved. But the question hung there. What came next? "Captain," Visser spoke from his console, the engineer's face impassive, but his hands gripped the controls with a quiet intensity. "I've been running diagnostics on the ship's systems. It's stable for now, but we've pushed it far beyond the limits we expected. We can't keep this up forever. We need a plan, something beyond just surviving the next round." Grey Ridge stood tall, his face a mask of calm, but there was fire in his eyes. "We've been underestimated for too long, Visser. But this isn't just about the Tiberis anymore. This is about setting a new course. For humanity. For what will become." He turned, fixing his crew with a steady gaze. "They thought we were weak. They thought we were easy prey. But now they'll know better. The galaxy will learn that humanity isn't something to be ignored." Uxar's voice cut through the stillness again, his words sharp, direct. "Captain, the aliens, they'll try again. They won't back off, not after losing face like this. We need to act. And fast." Grey Ridge met his gaze, and for a moment their eyes locked. The bond between them was clear, built through years of shared battles, hard choices, and relentless determination. Grey Ridge's voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of a new era. Let them come. This time we'll be ready. This time we won't just hide behind deception. This time humanity will make its mark on the galaxy. Sir, Reed interrupted, her voice strained as her hands flew across the controls. We've got incoming comms from Earth Command. They're asking for a debrief. Grayridge's lips twitched into a smile, but there was no warmth in it. Tell them to hold their applause, he said, his voice low and firm. We're just getting started. The rest of the bridge crew exchanged glances. They knew. The fight for survival was only part of the story. They had just shown the galaxy that humanity was no longer weak, that their so-called inferiority was a mistaken belief. And now they would have to deal with the consequences of underestimating the human race. A sharp buzz echoed in the room, followed by the sound of an incoming transmission. Grayridge glanced at the laser plasma display, which now flickered to life with the Earth Command seal. The voice that came through was deep, filled with the weight of years of preparation. Captain Grayridge, the officer on the other side said, his tone both cautious and respectful. Your report has been received. We've already started to shift our strategy. The war councils will convene immediately. Humanity is no longer the underdog. It seems we've finally caught up. Grayridge leaned forward, his voice low but resolute. We've never been the underdog. They just didn't see it. But now the galaxy will learn that humanity's strength lies not in their weapons, but in their ability to adapt, to learn, and to strike when it matters most. He paused for a moment, letting the weight of his words sink in. Tell Earth Command that the Tiberis may look like a relic, but we've just sent a message they won't ignore. Humanity is here to stay. As the transmission ended, Grayridge turned back to his crew, his expression a mix of calm satisfaction and the simmering heat of a battle that was far from over. They won't take us seriously for long, Uxar said, leaning back in his chair. But they will fear us now, and when the next battle comes, they won't know what hit them. Grayridge nodded. Fear. That's all we need. The crew's faces were set in expressions of quiet determination, their resolve strengthening. The Tiberis, now a symbol of human ingenuity and resilience, had dealt the galaxy a blow they wouldn't soon forget. And as the ship drifted through space, cloaked in its guise of imperfection, the galaxy would soon learn the most important lesson of all. Underestimating humanity wasn't just a mistake. It was a fatal flaw. Grayridge's gaze turned back to the display, watching the darkness of space as it stretched out before them. The war was far from over, but now, humanity's place in the universe had been secured. The galaxy was no longer a place where the strong held all the power. It was a place where the underestimated human race, had just risen to the top.